Welcome. So you might find a place to sit, perhaps something with a little harder or firmer base on it. And it could be a chair, or you might choose to sit on the floor if you like. So perhaps lengthening your spine. So you might lengthen your spine to the sky. And if you'd like, you might notice your breath. Maybe noticing the breath. You might notice the pacing of it. Like, are your inhales and exhales similar in length, or are they different? And one option might be to invite the breath to be even. So you might invite your inhales and your exhales to be similar in length. So that's one option. Another option might be to breathe as you are. You have a choice. Maybe noticing movement as you breathe. You might notice movement in the belly or chest. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And perhaps lengthening one arm up towards the sky. So you could reach one arm up towards the sky if you like, and maybe staying here. Another option might be to lean to the other side. So you might be leaning to one side, maybe noticing your breath. And if you're leaning to one side, you might lift back up to center. If your arm is lifted, you might lower it. And you're welcome to switch sides. So maybe reaching one arm up overhead and maybe staying here, or another option could be to lean to the side. So you might be leaning to one side. And if you're leaning to one side, you might notice some sensation in the side of your body. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And if you're leaning to the side, you might lift back up to center. And if your arm is lifted, you might lower it. And perhaps turning your head to one side. So you might be turning your head to one side, maybe turning it part of the way, or you could choose to turn it as far as you can. You have a choice. And if your head is turned to the side, you might bring it back to center and perhaps switching sides. So you might turn your head the other way. So you might be turning your head to one side, maybe turning it part of the way, or perhaps turning it as far as you can. You're in charge of your body. And if your head is turned to one side, you might bring it back to center and maybe tilting your head to one side. So you might be tilting your head to one side. And if you're tilting your head to one side, you might notice the breath. You might notice the pacing of your breath. Like, are your inhales and exhales similar in length, or are they different? And if your head is tilted to one side, you might bring it back to center and maybe switching sides, so you could tilt your head the other way. So you might have your head tilted to one side, maybe noticing the breath. And if your head is tilted to one side, you might bring it back to center. And one option might be to roll your head. So you could roll your head from side to side, Another option could be to roll your head in a circle all the way around. So you might do like a partial circle, or you could do a full circle. You have a choice. And if you've been moving your head, you might bring it back to center and perhaps moving your shoulders. So one option might be to roll your shoulders forward, or you could roll your shoulders back. So you might be moving your shoulders in some way. And maybe noticing the breath. And if you're moving your shoulders, you might bring them towards stillness and perhaps turning to the right. So you might turn to the right, maybe placing your left hand on your right leg. If you'd like, you could place your right hand behind you on the chair or floor. You might be turning to the side, maybe noticing your breath. And if you're turning to the side, you might return back to center and perhaps switching sides. So you could turn the other way, maybe turning to one side, maybe turning to the left, perhaps placing your right hand on your left leg. And you're welcome to notice the breath. You might notice movement as you breathe in your belly, your chest. And if you're turning to one side, you might make your way back to center and perhaps extending one leg out in front of you, maybe placing your heel on the floor. So you might have one leg extended out long in front of you, perhaps with your heel on the floor. And you might lengthen your spine, and you could stay here. Another option might be to fold forward, so maybe you're placing your hands on your legs or on the floor. You have a choice. And perhaps noticing the breath. You might notice sensation in the back of your extended leg. You might notice it somewhere else. Or maybe not at all. If you're folded forward, you might lift back up and perhaps extending your other leg out. So you might have one leg extended out in front of you, perhaps placing your heel on the floor. So you might have your heel on the floor, maybe your leg is moving towards straight. And maybe lengthening your spine to the sky, you could stay here. Or if you'd like, you might hinge at your hips and fold forward, perhaps placing your hands on your legs or the floor. You have a choice. Perhaps noticing your breath. And if your leg is extended in front of you and you're folded forward, you might lift back up and perhaps bringing your leg back in. And one option might be to cross your ankle over your opposite thigh. So you might cross one leg over the other, perhaps opening your knee to the side. You might be making like this figure 4 shape and perhaps lengthening your spine to the sky. Or another option could be hinging at your hips to fold forward. So you could fold over your front leg, maybe noticing your breath. If your leg is crossed over, you might release, perhaps switching sides. So you might cross your other leg over. So you might cross one ankle over your thigh, perhaps opening your knee to the side, maybe lengthening your spine to the sky. Another option might be to hinge at your hips, perhaps folding forward. You have a choice. Maybe noticing your breath. You might notice sensation in the outer hip of your top leg, or you might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And perhaps releasing. You're welcome to place both feet on the floor. Your knees might be bent. And if you'd like, you might lean back. So you might lean back slightly, maybe leaning back so that your shoulders are there's a space between your chair and the shoulders. Might be leaning back, perhaps noticing some sensation in your abdominals. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And if you're leaning back, you might lift back up. And perhaps pausing, you might notice your breath. And if you'd like, as you inhale, you might move your belly forward, maybe lifting your head and chest. As you exhale, you might round your spine, lowering your chin to your chest. Perhaps on an inhale, you might move your belly forward, maybe lifting your head and chest. And maybe as you're exhaling, you might round your spine, perhaps lowering your chin toward your chest. And you're welcome to do that a few more times, following your own breath if you like, or you can follow my movements. You have a choice. And perhaps the next time you inhale, you might lift up to seated. So you might lengthen your spine towards the sky. And maybe as you inhale, you might reach your arms overhead. So you might lift your arms towards the sky. And perhaps folding forward. So you could fold forward, maybe placing your hands on the floor or your hands on your legs. And maybe as you inhale, you might lift your spine up halfway from wherever you are. Maybe placing your hands higher up on your legs. And then as you exhale, you might fold. Maybe noticing your breath. And perhaps as you inhale, you might reach your arms back up overhead. And maybe as you exhale, you might bring your hands through heart center down by your sides. Maybe on an inhale, you might reach your arms overhead. Perhaps on an exhale, you might fold forward. Maybe as you inhale, you might lift up halfway. And perhaps as you exhale, you might fold. Maybe as you inhale, you might reach your arms up overhead. And perhaps as you exhale, you might bring your hands through heart center down by your side. And if you'd like, you might lean forward, maybe placing your forearms on your thighs or your hands on the floor. And perhaps noticing the breath. You're welcome to stay here, or if you'd like, you might return to seated, and we'll rest for about 30 seconds. So you might lean back in your chair or lie down on the floor if you're on the floor. And so you're welcome to rest. I'll quiet my voice for the next 15 seconds as we rest. You're welcome to stay resting where you are longer. Another option might be to make your way to seated. It's been my pleasure to guide your practice today. Peace. If you're joining me today, I'd like to invite you to like my Facebook page, or my YouTube page. You can like my Facebook page, which is Pathways to Wellness. But I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube page and to share this experience. I'd really like to help people have a nice little break to calm themselves throughout the day. The more the merrier. So thank you so much for being here.